Welcome to Transforming and Thriving
with best friends Brooke, Stacy, and Nelia.
Podcast dedicated to women sharing their inspirational stories.
Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to another amazing episode. I'm Brooke.
And I'm Stacy. Today, we are thrilled to welcome a truly inspiring guest, Susan Parmalee. Susan is a licensed clinical social worker and the executive director of the Wellness and Prevention Center, which is also known as WPC. She's also a devoted wife to Brian, a loving mother to Brendan, Trevor, and Melissa, and a proud Gigi to Kit. Susan has dedicated many years to exploring diverse, meaningful experiences, which have all led her to where she is today, a leader in the nonprofit community, committed to supporting the well-being of young people. Her journey, at times challenging, has been instrumental in shaping the remarkable person she is now. On a personal note, I've led mindfulness groups for teens through her organization in the local community and schools, and I've looked up to Susan for years as a mentor and a true inspiration in our community. She's a visionary, a worker bee, humble beyond words, and truly invested in teen mental health.
Hi, Susan. We're so honored to have you here and really grateful that you're willing to share your story with our Transforming and Thriving community. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good, thank you.
Good. And where are you joining us from?
I am joining you from San Juan Capistrano. We are headquartered there, and I live close by in San Clemente.
Awesome. Well, I definitely miss San Clemente. That's actually where I met Stacy and Nelia. And I know Stacy is also in San Juan, so you guys are close by. So you've chosen to join us today to share a significant life event that marked a before and after in your life. Would you be able to walk us through this major transition?
Yes, so when I was in my late 30s, I made the decision to go to grad school. I'd been, up to that point, I'd worked in the corporate hotel world. Then we went overseas, and I had 3 children. And when we moved back to the States, my kids were getting ready to go into elementary school or were already started in elementary school. And I realized that, that wasn't something that was going to speak to me, that if I was going to go back into the workforce, I wanted to do something that really meant something to me. And I'd done some exploring and volunteering, and I really landed on the fact that I wanted to be a social worker. So I started on that journey, but it also, as I started grad school, it really triggered some deep stuff inside from when my mom chose a professional career, and kind of how that impacted me, and a lot of other, I think a lot of people, when they do grad school in the healing fields, they start to realize things that they maybe didn't heal themselves. So while I was in grad school, I became very depressed, and an eating disorder I had never really resolved resurfaced. So it became, the challenge I thought I wanted, with an additional challenge that was very difficult and hard for our whole family, and one that recovering out of really had a big impact on my life. It made me realize that some critical years were those teen years when I was, differentiating from my family and trying to, grow into adulthood, and maybe led to some choices that weren't really the ones I wanted to make, and it took a lot longer for me to explore and find who I wanted to be. But then having the courage to treat a mental health problem, particularly an eating disorder, without really letting people know, it wasn't a time you really wanted to do that, especially when you were interacting with other families with children, made me realize a lot of the things that I wanted to change, that I wanted to see differently. I wanted people to feel comfortable seeking mental health help. I wanted to let people know it was okay. I wanted people to learn to share. We weren't sharing those kind of things. I think we've come a long way, and it really does inform a lot of the work I do today.
I had no idea that you had struggled with that, and I'm so sorry to hear that you had to do it in silence for so long. And it sounds like what an amazing insight and awareness to have that opportunity at such a difficult and probably very stressful time when you're pursuing training for a new career. And you're right, I think going into a field like that, it kind of forces you to hold a mirror back and deal with a lot of those things that come back up from your childhood. And it's really neat to hear that going through all of that and reflecting back on your experiences, it sounded like really inspired you to be that person for other youth that are going through and struggling with other similar things. I'm curious because I think going through all of that while in school and having young children is just a huge undertaking. How did you find the strength and courage to continue to pursue that direction and have to kind of battle with all of these things that were coming up for you?
Well, I think that the struggle really impacted my family quite a bit. My middle child, who like me is a true empath, he knew something was going on. So he escalated into stomach problems. So I'm sitting here, I was trying to deal with some mental health problems and which came with a chronic headache, which was interesting. So that way we was looked at medically when it probably wasn't medical. It was probably part of the depression. And then having a child that was sick too, and then feeling like I wasn't doing anything well. So just kind of feeling kind of like I was observing my life and just getting through it, which kind of came through, you just that what was I was raised, unless you're in critical condition, you just went on with your life. You got on with things. You didn't, I was known as the kid who got upset over everything. And that was a flaw, not something that showed that I really cared deeply and on deep emotions. So I think it really makes me realize it made me who the mom I was, and it made me want to be better. So I had the encouragement to be better. And I learned a lot about how it feels to be the client, to be the person in the therapy group. I can remember sitting in my first eating disorder group and all I could do was sit and cry. I couldn't even talk. And suddenly having to be that vulnerable was something I was never allowed to do. So that's I brought that both to how I parented and to how I really wanted to solve the problem. It wasn't a quick fix. This was a long building depression. And it took, a good year to really come out of it and making sure I accessed the right psychiatrist, the right therapist. And I got through it because I was brought up, you get through everything, you do it. But I think what really came through to me is starting to realize that sometimes things you just have to be enough. You can't be the best. And so I think I worked a lot on I'm not going to do everything in my life perfect, but I'm always going to try to do the best I can. And that can just be enough.
What you're saying really makes me think of the idea of a highly sensitive person. There's a book that I've read, and I know Stacey has referenced in the past. A lot of times society tells us that deeply emotional or sensitivity is a weakness, but in reality, it can be such a superpower and strength. Of course, there's challenges with feeling things so deeply, but it also allows for such a strong sense of empathy, connection, and intuition. I love that you've been able to shift from seeing that side of yourself as a flaw and even in your son into something that makes you uniquely able to support and uplift others. That's such a beautiful reframe. And then I also just really love what you said about your mantra. Don't have to be perfect or the best. I am enough. That's such a powerful reminder, especially when we can feel so much pressure to constantly achieve and measure up, whether it's outside pressure or internal pressure. And sounds like creating that mantra really was grounding for you, and it's been a tool for you. Just a great example of how affirmations and mantras can really help people on their journey. Of course, they need to be meaningful to them. Thank you for sharing that.
I think it's important to note, though, that that's not a sudden realization. That took a
Mhm.
lot of time and a lot of a lot of good years of therapy and just growing a little more. So I think as you grow, it's like I don't think I realized it that in that really bad year. I think it takes time. It also when you can really look back and respect the journey and see how it put you in the place where you were meant to be, I think to me that's the that's pretty amazing, especially, now those kids that I was talking about that I was raising at the time, they're in their 30s. So it's just kind of cool to be able to look back on it and be like, they're good. I was enough. I got through what I needed to get through. And I just hope that what I learned from that helps other people get through and that the wisdom that you are enough can take a long time to get to that point.
Yeah, and thanks for highlighting that. You're so right. It does take time. It's not just read it in a book and absorb that and feel that. It does take so much time. So thank you for touching on that. During that time, what types of supports did you have around you? It sounds like you did a lot for yourself, but were there any people or specific things that really helped you and supported you during that time?
I had a really good therapist. And one thing, I want to put out there is if the first therapist you met isn't the right match, keep trying. I was really lucky to first time find that right therapist and also a really good psychiatrist who was super aware of all the hormonal changes women go through and did a lot of research and was really, really paid attention. And it was, I think, 30, 25 years ago, psychiatry looked a little different. They were able to spend a little more time. And I do think for some people, medication is life saving. That therapist was great. I also had two really solid friends. I wasn't always honest with them, but they noticed. They noticed. They stayed with me even on days that I maybe didn't even talk when we were together, and they stayed there. They were there with me. I didn't really show much of any of it to my classmates because that felt shameful. But I think, having a few key people and a couple really good professionals is what got me through that.
Yeah, it's so helpful to have just a couple key people, like you said, that you really feel safe and you can either talk to about everything or those that will show up for you even when you don't feel like talking. And having those boundaries also of knowing like who you do feel safe talking to. And maybe, it sounds like you kind of set boundaries with the people in your class, like you aren't really going to share as much with them. But I know I heard you mention shame, and I feel like that's such an important topic that isn't talked about enough. I know it has been more lately, but just the idea of shame sometimes can silence us. It can be kind of paralyzing, and that feeling of not being good enough. I like how you said that you kind of shifted your mentality to like you don't have to be amazing or the best at everything. You can be enough. And this whole idea of like I'm not enough and feeling shame, I think is just something so universal that so many people can relate to. I'm wondering, maybe during that period or even since then, what helped you to navigate moments where you have felt or you still feel shame creep in, or that feeling of like not feeling good enough? Are there things that have helped you?
Absolutely. I now know when I need to go back and see a therapist. I don't see a therapist all the time anymore, but I have one, that knows when I reach out, she's going to make time for me. So, first of all, when I feel that kind of creeping back in, I make sure I see her. I am much better with self-care. I try not to slip into the control of the bad eating patterns where I just would stop eating. And I'm much more conscious of not falling back into those kind of patterns. I think the hardest thing when it is sneaking up on me, I tend to stop sleeping, and that's really difficult. So I make sure that I get the support to get my sleep back on track. And a lot of times that means, I ask my husband to stop sleeping in the same bedroom, which, isn't always an easy thing to ask for. But it's good to know when you have a partner that understands why you're doing it. So making sure those self-care things happen. I make sure now that we have at least 2 trips a year pre-planned so we know we're getting away. There's a lot of stress in running a nonprofit, and we now have 20 staff members, so that's a lot to manage. So, and I just really remember that word in my brain. I just say to myself, I'm enough. There's other people that this isn't something I'm doing alone. Other people are there with me. When it's coming back to it's all on me, then I have to sit back and rethink it.
Very well said. And I know we talk a lot on this podcast about taking care of yourself and self care, but I love everybody's different ways of how they think about it. I really appreciate how you're talking about both the reactive and proactive sides of self care, kind of paying attention to these cues and then responding and making some adjustments. And then you also talked about some plans you put in place for the future for breaks that give you that kind of self care and support that you need. It's really important. And I appreciate you highlighting that. You also mentioned having people in your environment that you can lean on for support. I was curious, was that something that came natural for you to accept, or did that take some time?
Yeah, and I didn't grow up depending on others. We were, my family was this interesting house of very people that were my parents thought it was cool to be super independent and make sure you got everything done for yourself. And that was something I took into adulthood that I'm now very careful to not do. I know which girlfriends to call when I need to just go have dinner out. I know who's going to be. I know who has that empathy to share back with me. But I also recognize that I need to also be ready to share with them, and that was something that I don't think I was capable to do before, you know, the colossal kind of breakdown that I had. So learning that people do wanna hear what's going on with me and that it did matter was a big step for me. And I think it can be for others because I think that a lot of people think maybe where they're coming from isn't as important as listening to someone else, and it is. So I think the skill of, also being capable of sharing and having people carry part of your load for you is super important.
Yeah, and not everybody's comfortable asking for help. It requires vulnerability, and not everybody is comfortable with that. It takes some work for sure. And it sounds like you did a lot of work to move through that discomfort, and it has really helped you, and you see the value in kind of having this village of support around. I was curious for maybe our listeners who are feeling like there's a major transition going on, feeling a little lost, maybe some shifts happening. What's some advice or tips that you have for them that might steer them in the right direction or get them started?
Yeah, I think I probably have a couple. Before I decided to go all in and go back to grad school, there's other ways to kind of test your feelings about where you're going. So I actually volunteered with a really amazing organization, CASA, which is court appointed special advocates. And it's a really good intensive training. And then I had a youth in foster care that I was with for a full year. And I was like, yeah, this is what makes me feel good. But, besides being a mother, which is what really was an important thing to me too, but it made me feel good. And it made me feel like, yes, this is a career path I can go on. And I talked to people. I talked to people in the mental health field. I said, here's what I'm feeling I want to do. Which way do you think I should take it? And for me, it landed on a social work degree, but there's often a lot of different pathways to those changes you might wanna make in your career or your life. Maybe you wanna move. There's a lot of things. Talk to people who have done these things. If you talk to them, they've already found some ways to figure some things out. And I'm always gonna recommend a mental health therapist, even if it's or even through work. We often have in our health plans, we have just people you can talk to a few times. Those people are trained to listen to you and listen to what it is you're looking for and help guide you in making some decisions. So there's both professionals, there's people that are working in the field, there's people that maybe made a big move and decided to move across the country to look for something different. But take advice from others and try things out. Don't go all in until you kind of have gathered the information.
I love that. That's such great advice and so helpful, I think, for someone who's considering making a big change or just wanting support around something that they're going through to ask and talk to people who have gone through something similar. I have a kind of related question. What would you tell your younger self that would have potentially made your life easier if you could go back in time?
That the acceptance of others is not that important, but doing what makes you feel good is. I think I spent a lot of time waiting for some positive feedback that I was not going to get. And I think if I'd given up on that a little sooner, I would have been able to move forward more quickly. So, yeah, I think if I could have skipped that journey or made that journey a little shorter, it might not have hit me as hard.
That's really good advice. It's like validating yourself and not seeking the validation of others. Very, very wise.
Thank you.
Yeah. Know that I've heard about the Wellness and Prevention Center from Stacy. She's spoke so highly of you as well as the work that you guys are doing. Would you mind sharing a little bit more about the work you guys are doing and what you're really passionate about?
Yeah. So I think one of the things that really made me want to go into social worker is the advocacy piece. And then it kind of adding in being a mental health therapist as part of my journey as a social worker did end up being a good pathway for me. And I think what we were starting to see when we talked about building the Wellness and Prevention Center, we were seeing a lot of young people struggling. So we started the organization about 10 years ago, myself and a couple other parents who just didn't see youth finding the resources they need. And our idea was that, if you put a mental health therapist at a high school, which the high schools in our area didn't have, they had a school counselor and they had only one, so it was very difficult. That maybe youth will access that help and start making good choices and finding ways to overcome some of the stressors and challenges they were having. So that kind of grew into, every young person should be able to see a therapist when they want. It shouldn't be dependent on insurance. It shouldn't be dependent on not being able to get to the office. We wanted to find ways for young people to be able to see a mental health therapist. And then it grew. We looked at the prevention piece too. And, how do we educate the community in lowering the stigma about mental health and how to access these services, how to not use alcohol and drugs when you're a teen. So we started a big part of what we do is our prevention education, both for youth and for parents, which helps all of these people be aware they can access support. So we now have mental health therapists in 7 of our schools, middle schools and high schools here in South Orange County in the Capistrano Unified School District. We have about 8 people working on prevention education. And now we have our newest program about to open in August, and this will be Alcove. It's an integrated care center for 12 to 25-year-olds, which is these centers are going in across the state of California. And youth and their families can get support for mental health, physical health, substance use, peer support, family support, and career and academic support. So it's one building. You can come in and has a really nice social space so you can start to feel comfortable and then start to figure out, do I want to access some of these services? And they're all for mild to moderate care and along with referrals for higher level needs in the community. So we're just really excited to be part of this movement of looking at different ways to support our young people so that we know that they will, grow and transition into really positive adulthood. So that's kind of all of our programming. That's the goal. We just want young people to be able to find the support they need in South Orange County.
Wow, how wonderful. What an amazing resource. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm so excited about everything that you're doing, and it's truly remarkable just, having watched from the sidelines for years, how much that the organization has grown, and I'm so excited to see what happens next. And with the opening of Alcove, I think it's going to be amazing. There's so many important resources and services that you have provided already for the community and that you will be providing. And thank you for sharing your story with us today as well. I wanted to announce we're thrilled that we're launching our new philanthropy initiative. So we want to invite all of our amazing listeners to help support the incredible work Susan is doing with the Wellness and Prevention Center and their new Alcove Center by raising funds for their incredible programs that Susan spoke about that have so many benefits for young people in the community. Your donations make a real difference. And to kick things off, we will be matching up to $1,000 in donations. You can find a link to donate directly in our show notes. Susan, is there anything else that you want to share about what the donations will be funding or all of the exciting things that are coming up?
Yeah, we've really put the majority of our funds towards our professional staff. And, so that means your funds are helping a young person access support. We look forward to the soft opening of Alcove, and there'll be more on our Instagram and our website as we get closer to that date. And, we have this amazing group of youth leaders who are contributing to planning the activities that happen in the social space there, and really looking forward to youth having this space and owning it and seeing the things they want to happen in it.
We're so excited to partner with you, and thank you so much for being here and sharing your wisdom with us.
Well, I really appreciated the opportunity. And, kind of one of the things we say here in our organization, if this helps one person, then we've done our job.
Well said. To all of our listeners, thank you for joining us on this episode of Transforming and Thriving. If you found Susan's episode as inspiring as we did, please follow us on your favorite podcast app and follow us on Instagram so you can be part of this community and stay up to date with each episode. You can also learn more about Susan's work at WPC-OC.org and find them on social media at WPCOC. We will also put a link in our show notes for their website.